So the second entry is going to be a ped, and so we're going to have to spawn a ped and give that ped some chords. So let's start with that. So the first thing we got to do is give the ped coordinates. And the reason that we're doing an H2 this time is because I called it X2, Y2, Z2 just to make sure that we didn't, just to make it more clear for the tutorial. I could delete the local and just use XYZ and it would redefine these variables. But just to make it clear, I went ahead and used X2, Y2, Z2, H2, just so that I have a different variable for this. And we're using H this time because we're using a vector 4. You can see the ped interaction point is a vector 4. The fourth, so this is X, Y, and Z, and the fourth variable is the heading. So that will be the direction that the ped is facing. So I've done the table unpack so that I unpack that vector 4 coordinate into 4 variables. And then this is going to be confusing, but I need a vector 3 also, and this is what I was just talking about. I've redefined vector 3 here, so I don't need local in front of it, because it was vector 3 equaled this amount for example 1, and as soon as I do this, all that information is deleted, and vector 3 now is equal to it's not going to be equal to all 4 though, because I'm specifying that it's a vector 3, so it's going to actually be equal to that. Well, yeah, vector 3. So I took a vector 4 and I converted it to a vector 3 is what I just did. I pulled out the x, y, z, and h, and then I reassigned the x, y, z to a vector 3. I've added a minus 1.0, so this is z minus 1.0, because if you don't do that, the ped will be floating in the air. If you've ever been on a server or you've seen a ped floating in the air, it means that they grabbed the chords and did not subtract 1, because for whatever reason, the ped's feet will be at the chord that you enter, not their center of mass, whereas whenever you grab the chord from your player, it's grabbed from your center of mass. So the peds will always be one meter higher than they're supposed to be, unless you put a minus 1. So that's the purpose of the minus 1. And then I got to define the model that I want to use. And so that's just referencing back to my config. It's telling it CSP mod is the model. I think I've went through that enough for everyone, but I'll do it one more time. Config.lesson1's.location ped interaction point.ped model. So that's basically telling it where to reference the variable at, and it's config.lessons locations, the ped interaction point, and then ped model, and so the variable that's returned is CSB mod. All right, so local model is the same as CSB mod. All right. Okay, so then this is where you have to start doing things that are not as easily. I mean, to this point, I would assume everything's been pretty clear. So the first thing we have to do that's not completely clear is request model. So since I'm on the client side, I have to contact the server and tell it that I need a model from the server so that I have all the information that I need in order to create the ped. So one thing that you might learn from looking is, let me delete that. If you just type in request model, this may or may not work. It depends on how fast your client is. So if you have somebody with a potato computer, it may work on your computer if you have a high-end one, but someone else may have lower computing speed, and you do request model, and then you instantly go to the next thing, and they're not going to have the data they need, and so it won't give you any errors or anything, but the model will fail to create. So what you do is you put in a loop to wait until the model loaded. So let's do this real quick. I didn't open up this screen. I'm going to pull up a screen real quick. Give me a second. I had mentioned before the class that one of the things that you're going to need access to, or that you're going to need to have bookmarked, is the native scripts. So you can see right here, here's request model, and you can read all the documentation on request model here, and you can do has model loaded, and there it is. That's a native script. So these functions that I just type in like that, instead of like defining the function or writing a function, so these are built-in FiveM functions. So anytime you type in request model and give it a model name, FiveM knows what to do with it. And has model loaded is also a FiveM native. So anything that's located in this link, these FiveM native references, it'll have instructions for how to use those things, and you can use anything out here, and there's a million of them, and they all do something, and that's the key to, like, add blip for area, add blip for core. I mean, we can go through all these, and eventually we'll go through a lot of them throughout the series of the classes. But the other thing to keep in mind is there's server natives and there's client natives. Sometimes they don't work on both sides. Some things like create object are both client and server. There's create object on the client and there's create object on the server. One tip that I'll give you is that create object on the server side does not work. You have to use create object no offset. We'll talk about that at a later date. But it says here on the documentation that you can use create object on the server side, but that is in fact false. I know that you have to use create object no offset if you're doing it on the server side. But you don't need to know that yet because we're not creating an object. All right. Any questions on that? These are FiveM native functions. All right. The next FiveM native function that we're going to use is create ped. And I will pop over here real quick and do create ped. We're on the client side. There's create ped. So for create ped, we have to have a ped type. We have to have a model hash. We have to have an X, Y, and Z chord. We have to have a heading. We have to tell it if it is network, and then bscript host ped. Bscript host ped means it's whether you register it as a Rockstar network model or not. And I don't know what that means. So I can't help you with that one, but I can tell you how to make it work. All right, so we create our ped. So there is our. I should need to figure out a way to split the screen on this so that you can see both. Okay, so okay, so that's not big enough to see everything. Slide this over a little bit. All right, so there's create ped. So the first thing is ped type. We're using 4, and the reason we're using 4 is not listed here, but you have to go. I don't remember how I found out it has to be 4, to be honest with you. But I know that if you're creating a ped, and it's not an animal, and it's not a like some kind of exotic ped, if it's just a standard ped model, like you can pick from your character creation screen, 4 is the number. Model is mod. It's the model that we defined, CSB mod. Let me pull this back up. So we need our XYZ chords. So we have X2, Y2, Z2, which we defined here. And we're doing minus 1.0 on Z because we don't want her to be floating in the air. Yeah, okay. All right, and then heading is the 4th variable, H2. Is network false means that it's only going to be client side. So this mod will be seen by every client because we're creating it on player loaded for every client. But if we didn't do it that way, you would need to create more. But False means that every client is going to have their own individual ped. If you set this to true for this example, every time somebody loads, it's going to create another ped. So if you've ever been on a server where there's like peds stacked up or there's props stacked up or something like that, it's because something like a mistake like this was made where they did a client side function and they set that value to true. So if you set that to true, every time somebody logs in, there will be another mod created, and everybody will see that mod. And then false is I don't want it to be bscript hosted. So anyway, that's gonna create the ped. And then I'm going to need to do some things with that ped, because what will happen if I just do that is there will be a ped. It'll be on the server and it'll stand in one place because it doesn't have anything to do. But if somebody walks up and shoots it, it's going to die. And if you walk too far away from it or you're not close to it, it'll despawn because it doesn't have any. It's not a mission entity. It doesn't have anything to do. So there's a couple more natives that we have to do. So the first one, whenever you're doing a ped that you want to stay in place and be stationary, is to set it as a mission entity. And we'll do that, set entity as mission entity. And so, yeah, you're just using this. So you tell it what entity, and it's going to be the ped that you just created. You tell it what if you want it to be a script host object, so that means that it's not going to despawn unless the script goes off. So as long as the script is on, the ped is going to be controlled by the script. And then the last one is be grabbed from other script. I don't know what that means. I just know that it's supposed to be true. And then set blocking of non-temporary events. You have to say the ped, and you set it to text is popping up. Anyway, set blocking of non-temporary events. This means like if there's an explosion or there's gunshots or whatever, the ped won't run away. It'll ignore temporary events, which are explosions, fights, stabbings, death, whatever. The ped will just ignore all that stuff. If you set this value to false, then the ped will run away if it gets scared. Or it will try to, but it can't because we freeze the entity position. So that'll keep the ped so that you can't hit it with a car and knock it over, or hit it with or run into it and push it out of its location. So freeze entity position. So if you had this to false, but this was true, the ped would be standing in one place freaking out, like yelling and talking and freaking out because it's trying to get away, but it can't. And then set entity invincible. That's just so the player can't walk up and shoot it and kill it or whatever. So you can't kill your peds that you want to be in place for a QB target scenario. Any questions on that? Okay, so the first one that we did up here, the random interaction point, this is going to be just a random point where I'll walk up in third eye and something happens, and I'll show you that whenever we get into the server. But basically, I picked a spot on a desk where I can third eye the desk and look at like a notepad or something, and it'll give me the QB target options. And for this one, we've created a ped, but we still have to do a QB target so that the ped has an interaction point. And so the way that I do it, there is a way to, I'm not even going to show you how to do it because it causes problems. There is a way to create a ped and reference that ped model for an interaction. But what will happen is, say you picked the fat guy that walks around, or LaQuisha, or whatever her name is, the fat lady with the afro. Say you use that ped model and you set that ped to have a QB target. Every one of those peds on the server will have that QB target. Everyone that you walk up to, you can third eye and he'll give you that option. So that's not a good way to do it. I don't even know why they have that function. Except like if you wanted to have some sort of server where there was no players on and you had police that you could walk up to and ask for assistance or something, maybe that would make sense. But generally speaking, you don't want every ped. What happened?
We also have a question when you're finished.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Jack is asking, so for the freeze entity, could you set it to false so when someone runs into it, it will move only for them but no one else, thus to stop power gaming and finding the peds?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could, because it'll only move on the client side, so nobody else's would move unless they ran into it. Yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually. But we'll experiment with that whenever we run this script and test it out. We'll give that a shot and see what happens. Thanks for the question, because I don't know that I've ever done that. I'm not sure. I think they would run away though, and they should only run away for the client. But the only way we could test would be to have multiple clients in the server and see what happens. We're at an hour and a half, so I'm going to try to pick it up a little bit. All right, so now we've created our mod ped, and we want her to have an interaction point, so we have to do another QB target export. And I went through all that explanation just to let you know not to try to just assign it to a ped like it says in the QB target documentation because of the problems it causes. So we've created a ped, we've frozen it in location, and we've set it to invincible. And so I'm just going to build a target zone around that ped. So same thing that we did before. The only difference is the chords because we're using this new vector 3 that we assigned here. But other than that, everything's exactly the same. Okay, so now if we launch the server right now and we would be able to walk up to these, there would be a point where we could do this, and we would walk up to the mod would be there, and we could third eye her, and everything would be great. We could see her, but all you would have is a QB target, and if you clicked on either of the selections that are from the config, so you're going to have a target that says sign document, you're going to have a target that says pay fee, and you're going to have a target that says ask for a refund. If we just stopped here and launched the server, you'd have these two locations where you could do a third eye, but nothing would happen whenever you select the options because we haven't told it what to do. So the first thing we're going to do is tell it what to do whenever it gets signed document. So if you look at the config, I called this function KSUI less than one client signed document. So it's going to be a client-side function, and we're going to use the register net event method to create the function. So now this is the variable that's going to be referenced. So whenever you do the third eye and you click sign document, it's going to trigger the function on the client side named this. And this can be anything you want. It could be a string of numbers or whatever. But so KSUI client signed document. If I do a search for it, it'll highlight it. When I flip over, you can see that's where it's going. So you third eye, you pick signed document. The QB target says, okay, I'm going to trigger client function signed document. And so basically, if this is where your cursor ends up, right, in the code. I'm passing data. If I do a QB core debug data, which I have right here, QB core debug will print out variables, and it will print out tables, and it will print out print messages. So I can do QB core debug KSUI is the best. And that's going to print to my server log, KSUI is the best, and then immediately following that is going to be the data. The data that you're going to get whenever you use QB target, basically QB target takes everything that it receives and it passes it through. So whenever we run this on the server, I'll show you guys. Whichever option I pick, this is all the data that's going to be passed. And so that QB core debug is going to print a table that has all of this information on it to show me what was passed to the function. And I'll show you that whenever we fire the server up and take a look at it. So if I'm not wanting to do anything, this is our first script, our first lesson, and I'm trying to speed it along here. All I'm going to do is put a pop-up on your screen that says it's just going to be a notify, qbcore.functions.notify, and it's going to say, hey, you signed the document. It's going to be in green because I picked success, and it's going to be on the screen for 5 seconds. All the timers on FiveM run in milliseconds, and so 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second. And so 5,000 milliseconds is 5 seconds. So that's how long this printout is going to be on the screen. And that's it. That's the end of the function. That's what's going to happen if you pick signed document. The second thing that we're going to do is, let me flip back to my config. What was our second option? Our second option was a server option, and it was pay fee. All right, so we haven't done anything on the server yet. This is our first venture into the server file. Uh, Number one, you have to remember local QB core exports QB core get core object. That has to be on the top line. All right, now we're ready. Okay, so the first one that we're going to do is the pay fee. Um, uh, I'm going to copy line by line and paste line by line instead of pasting the whole thing just so you can keep up. So you can see all the red underlines. That's why I said I always put a block and put end, um, just to get rid of the error messages so that you can see what you're doing. Okay, so I'm ready to create my function. This is on the server side. So again, type is server and event is pay fee. So we're on our server, there's our event, and we're going to pay the fee. All right, so anytime you're on the server side, you want to know who told it to do something. So the first variable every time, whether you use it or not, whenever you're writing a server function, it's good practice to always say local src equals source. So basically, whenever you hit U and you see your user ID or whatever, your lucky number in the server, that's your client. So whenever you tell the server to do something, you do an interaction. It's going to send your client number, your client ID to the server, and it's going to be coming in as a variable called source. And so I always just change it src equals source. This is the client that triggered the event. So whenever you third eye and you click pay fee, if your lucky number is 10, local source equals source is going to be source equals 10, and that's going to identify for the server which client told it to do something. Again, just for tonight while we're doing the lesson, we're going to put in a debug of the data just so you can see the data that's passed over. I'm going to want the fee that they're going to pay to be $100. So I'm going to set up a variable, a local variable called fee, and that's going to be $100. Let's see. Okay, there's a function in QB core that gets all of the player's data. And the way you call that is QB core functions dot get player, and you have to tell it, source. You have to tell it which client that it's getting data from. That's going to get your metadata. I mean, if I were to do a QB core debug of this, it's a huge sheet because it has all of your information. It has all of your inventory items. It has all of your money, bank, and wallet. It has all of your vehicles. I mean, there's a whole lot of information that comes back. It's got all of your unique identifiers, your FiveM license, everything. So QB core functions.getPlayer gets all the possible information from a player, what they have in their inventory, what they have in their bank, what they have in their wallet, what their job is, all of that stuff. All of those various things are returned. So what I want to know is how much cash do you have, because you're going to have to pay me $100 because my fee is going to be $100. And so I'm going to use, just like I've been showing you guys how the dots goes through a config table. This is basically a table of your data, and the data that I'm looking for is your player data money cash. And if you're ever looking for a variable that you want to find and you're not sure what it's called or what kind of table it's in, I'm just going to go ahead and do this, qbcore.debug player, and that will print to your server log whenever somebody triggers this function. This qbcore.debug player will print for you the table of all their information. And sometimes it's enough information that it's more than you can fit on the screen, and you have to actually print the log and then go scroll through the information to find what you're looking for. So we're not going to actually run this in practice on the server because we can do that at a later date. But whenever you start experimenting with your own test server, just type that in and you can see all the different variable names and you can figure out what you need to reference. All right, so this is checking if they have enough cash that's greater than or equal to the fee, then we're going to do something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to remove money from them, and we do that with player.functions.remove money. So this is using, it's getting the information from the player, and it's taking their bank account and it's removing cash. So basically, this is a QB Core built-in function. And the other way that you could do this is you could do, let me think about it for a second. So this is essentially the same. This line right here is essentially the same as, wait, no, hold on, Z. I think this is right. Let me see here. Dot, yes, that's right. Dot, functions. It's just this, yeah. So if you didn't set up a variable, you could do the same thing with this whole long string of information. So everybody, as common practice, there's a whole lot of things that are going to require this at the beginning, and so we always just say player equals that, and then you can just reference the function that you want to use this way by saying player.functions. So, but this is the same thing as this, but we're going to use this because it's simpler, cleaner, and it's good practice. All right, so next we're going to notify them that they paid. Oops, sorry. Ignore that. That was the wrong copy. So we just took the $100 from them, and then we're going to notify them that that we took the $100. So whenever you use qbcore.functions.notify on the server side, you have to tell it which client that it's going to trigger. So you have to tell it source as in the front. And so this tells it it's going to, if you don't have source here, I think nothing will happen, or it will pop up for everyone. So I'm not sure which of those is correct, but if you put source there, it's going to send it to the correct client. And it's going to tell them they paid the fee, and it's going to say it's going to be a green message because it was a success. And I didn't put a timer here. It's going to be whatever the default is for how long a message stays on the screen. And I'm not sure what the default is. But if you don't put a number here, it's just going to give you the default time. Or we can put 10,000, and that's 10 seconds. And we'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to do something a little fancy. I don't want them to be able to just come back and get a refund anytime. But if they've made a mistake and they didn't intend to pay the fee and they want a refund, then I'm going to give them a refund. But I'm not going to give them a refund indefinitely. So I want to start a timer. So what I'm going to do is this is the first time you guys will have seen this one. It's going to be trigger client event, and the name of the event, let me just copy it over, is KCOE less than one client start timer. It's going to go to the source, which is the client that sent it over, and it's going to start a 60,000 millisecond timer, aka 60 seconds. So that's what's going to happen. And we haven't written that function yet, but we're going to next. But first, I want to say what happens if they don't have enough money. Well, if they don't have enough money, we just give them a notify and tell them that they don't have enough money. And I don't need that one. And there you go. So that's what happens whenever they click pay fee. So it's good practice when you're writing a script to step through everything, right? And so before I do the other interaction, I'm going to go ahead and create this function for client start timer. Now, this can be named anything you want. The practice that Snaley and I have tried to implement on IRP whenever we're writing scripts is we have the name of the script, and then we state whether it's a client or server function just to make them easier to find when you're troubleshooting, and then whatever the name of the function is. But this is our naming convention. It doesn't have to be named that way. That's just the IRP standard that we use so that we can troubleshoot each other's scripts, and it's nice and clean. All right, so I'm going to flip back over to the client, and again, this time we're going to do a registered net event because we're writing a function. and we're going to do our standard debug that I always just go ahead and add the debugs, and then I start turning them off once I verify that each part of the script is working. Oh, I don't need that. We're on the client side. What am I doing? I haven't. I'm referencing the wrong thing. Sorry. Ignore. I was on the wrong sheet. Okay, so let's start over. Sorry about that. All right, so we're going to register net event called KSUI client start timer, and it's always a good idea whenever you're writing a script, because spelling errors will be the bane of your existence, to highlight it, do Control F so that you're searching it, and then flip back over where you're coming from and make sure it's highlighted. Because if I had misspelled it, it's not going to be highlighted. And so that's a pro tip. If you do that and it's not highlighted, you screwed up. And so you can fix your spelling errors so that you don't have to cuss at your script later when it doesn't work. All right, pro tips. That's actually a good tip. I mean, it takes a while to learn things like that. All right, so you can see here for my function this time it's not empty like it was before on this one, and like it was before on this one. Actually, that one had data. I should have explained it before. Anyway, so whenever I triggered this event, remember I told it that it was 60,000 seconds. So when you trigger a client event, source is not passed. Source just tells it which client to trigger. If you're coming from the server over. So this variable goes away in the transition to the client because it's consumed essentially by knowing which client to go to. So the data that's going to be passed is 60,000. So I've renamed it to time here. So basically, time now is equal to 60,000. That's 600,000. So yeah. So that's what time is 60,000, and it was passed from the server. So whatever number I put here, whenever I pass it over, is what it will receive here. Okay. And so then I want to say the refund timer, which I defined above. Here's my refund timer. I defined it outside of the script, but it was an example that I'm doing. So basically, this is a local variable that's available inside of any function that I write on the client. And that will be important in some future lessons because there's some variables that you want to keep local inside the individual function, and there's other variables you want to reference from external. And you'll see why in a little bit why we want refund timer to be inside the entire script and not just in one function. All right. And so I need to create a timer. So I want it to last for 60 seconds. So I'm going to do a while loop. So while the refund timer is greater than 0, it started at 60,000, I'm going to do a loop. This is called a while do loop. So refund timer is going to equal refund timer minus 1,000. So it's going to go from 60,000 to 59,000, and it's going to wait 1,000, which is 1 second. So every second the timer is going to tick down 1 second. And as soon as refund timer is 0, then it's going to exit this loop, and the refund timer will be at 0. So as soon as it hits 0, that's the last loop it does, it will exit. Hopefully that makes sense. So while refund timer is greater than 0, it's going to be counting down every second. As soon as it hits 0, it's going to exit this function because that's no longer true. So basically, while this is true, you loop, and as soon as that's false, it's going to stop looping, and you're going to be having your refund timer equal to 0. Okay, so what the hell is going on? What is that? There we go, and then back. Okay, all right, so that one's done. All right. Now, why do we want that timer? It's because our next function is a client-side function, and it is called, from our config, our next function is called KSUI less than one client ask for a refund. So we're on the client. and we're going to register a net event called ask for a refund, and we're going to put in our end so it cleans up the error messages. And again, for good practice, we're going to throw a QB core debug data in there. And we're going to check. So if they're asking for a refund, we want to know if the timer is 0 or not. So, oh, shit. All right. So if the refund timer is greater than 0, then what happens? Well, if it's greater than 0, then we're going to need to, if it's greater than 0, it means the time hasn't expired, and so there's still is still valid for them to get a refund. So we cannot give them money on the client side, as we've discussed before. So we're going to have to trigger a server function, and the name of that is going to be request refund, and the amount that they're going to request is $100. It could be any number we want here. We could define a variable and send a variable, but for this example, we're just going to go ahead and tell it they paid 100, they get back 100, but then we're going to immediately set the refund timer to 0, because if you don't set it to 0 and you let the timer keep running, if they were to request a refund again, they'll keep getting $100 until the timer is 0. So we're going to refund them the money, immediately set the timer to 0 so they can't get any more money, because this first statement will be false if the refund timer equals 0. Any questions on that? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Else, we're going to tell them that they are not eligible for a refund, so we're just going to use our qbcore functions.notify, and we're going to tell them that the refund timer has expired. It's going to be red this time because we are using the error type message, and again, 5 seconds on the screen. So that's what will happen if they ask for a refund. Now, we had to trigger this server event called KSUI lesson 1 server request refund. So we're going to need to go back over to our server side, and we're going to register a new net event called request refund. And since we're doing this and we want to see what the data looks like, we're going to do a debug data. Again, the first variable that you want is source, local source equals source. And we want to know who the player is. So we have our player qbcore functions get player data, or get player source. We want to set up a variable for the refund amount, and it's equal to the data that's passed over. We could call this refund amount, and we just change this to refund amount. We could also, I'll show you that. Hold on, let's do this real quick. So to add money to a player, you use player.functions.addMoney. That's the QB core built-in function to add money. You can say cash or bank. You tell them how much, and then this is the data that's entered into their banking transactions. It'll just tell them it's a refund in their banking transactions. There is one other way we could do this. We can eliminate this step, and we can just use refund amount. Because we passed it over, it's going to recognize that variable. So you can eliminate that line of code and just say, hey, we're going to pick up whatever is sent over. So the first was just an example, and then that's another way to do it. I like to do it the other way personally. Yeah. It's perfectly fine to do it either way. I like to do it this way because I like to, I don't know. I don't know what a good reason is. I just like to redefine it and make sure that I have the variable that I want. Let me see. I think that's it. So let me save that. Boom, save all. And we just wrote a script. The script is called KSUI lesson 1. So let's take a look at it.